We're going to go
Or
ahead and
today,
get
this
started.
evening.
It's 4 minutes after 7. So I want to really respect your time. Hey, Jerry, I see you in the background there. Welcome to day 2 of this event. We are thrilled that you're here. We are going to tonight, the main thing we're going to do tonight is hear from our guest speakers. That's what we want to do. We want to hear from you and give us an opportunity to ask questions. But before that, I'm going to tell you a little bit about Powerstories, and I'm going to pass it on to Claire Ann, who's our artistic director, and then Claire Ann will get the thing started. So most of you know about Powerstories. We've been around for 25 years. It is a theater company, a nonprofit theater company that stages true stories to open minds and hearts. And it's primarily with featuring women and girls. We're very much in tune to doing shows that are written by women about women. And 95% of everything we've done on the Power Story stage has been, true stories about women. We have a season of shows. We do pop-up theater, which is new this year, which is what this was last night, which was, oh my gosh, an important topic. We're going to do it. We're going to do it now. We're going to do it lickety split. And boy, did we ever. We also have a girls program and we have a Voices of Women theater program. So as you can tell, I'm saying the word women and girls all the time. Um, we love that as part of our mission. So I'm going to introduce you to Claire Ann Spain. She is our artistic director and she'll kick it off from there. Claire Ann.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. I want to really quickly let you know what happened last night for those of you who weren't able to join us. We did, as Fran said, it was sort of our pop-up, we're calling them power-ups, our staged readings, which are an opportunity to bring the community together around a critical social issue. And of course, given that we were not able to pass Amendment 4, securing bodily autonomy for Floridians in November, particularly around reproductive freedom and abortion rights. We were really excited to do Jane. So we had about over 100 people there. It was an audience that was incredibly responsive and engaged. They laughed, they gasped. The actors could hear them at moments say, "Oh my God," because of the incredible things that this play teaches us about your history. And I was saying to Fran earlier, and I want to say to all of you that even if you're fairly educated, um, there are still so many nuances that you discover through the play. And I, I just have to say, I stand in awe of the work that you have done. And last night was, of course, a fundraiser for the Tampa Bay Abortion Fund. I'm hoping Bree Wallace, who is basically their one staff member. I'm hoping she'll be able to join us, but she's their one staff member, and her job is to connect people who somehow miraculously know that they're within the 6-week timeline set by the state of Florida to abortions locally, but also to help them travel out of state to obtain abortions. And so she can't be with us. It's because she's on the front lines, just like you all were. But I hope she shows up in part because Diane, your photos of you when you were about her age and looking at her, y'all are doppelgangers. So it's exciting to see that sort of magical resonance happening of folks who are on the front lines doing the work. Okay, so we're gonna keep this to about an hour. So I'm gonna wrap up really quickly. I just want to point out how we'd like to do this. The structure. I'm going to tell you who our guests are, and then I'm going to ask each of you in turn to just take a few minutes to introduce yourselves. Tell us a little bit about your background with Jane and anything else you might want to share. And then we're going to open it to a Q&A. As we get to the Q&A, friends, if you go down to the bottom of your screen, you should see a little heart that says react. And if you click on that, it'll give you a little pop-up menu. And if you can raise your hand, what we'll do is Deb will call on folks in turn so that you can ask your question to our guests. Does that make sense? Questions about that? I'm sorry, I'm always trying to navigate the technology and make this as smooth and easy as possible. Okay, so it is with great pleasure that I draw your attention to Paula Kamen. If you could give me a little wave, and then we'll go down the list. Who is our playwright? Heather Booth, one of the founders of Jane. Diane Stevens, if you could give us a little wave. Another remarkable Jane, and Eileen Smith. Uh, Yet another remarkable Jane. I'm fangirling really hard right now. So I'm gonna shut up. And if we could just start in, if you could each take a turn introducing yourselves and telling us a little bit about you. And then when Eileen's finished, we'll turn it over to questions. Okay? Thanks so much. I'm gonna shut up.
I can start. I'm Eileen Smith. I was a member of Jane after having an abortion through Jane, which really, one, saved my life, at least psychologically, and also made me really want to work with this group because it meant so much to me and I was treated so well. So I really learned a lot from doing all of this, and it sort of set me on a path that I was very appreciative of and made me feel so much more confident and competent. So that is really why I'm so glad I did it, and I'm glad that the story is still out there.
Go next. Mostly I wanted to thank all of you, from thanking Paula Kamen for having written this play, which I think it was over 20 years ago that I saw the play.
That's a while ago.
Yeah, maybe 30. Yeah, maybe about
Yeah, it was
25.
a long time ago.
Yeah.
And so it's a little vague memory. But Paula, thank you for recording the story. At that point, very few people had recorded the story and shared it out more publicly. And now it's become much more known, both because of the crisis that's happening on abortion. When Paula was writing it, we barely talked about abortion. So it's much more common now, but also because of the movie, The Janes, and the visibility that got. I wanted to thank all of you, the actors who put this together. I printed out the program, so I have a list so I know what. I'm trying to match up your faces now with let's see, is Fran on?
I'm Fran.
Oh,
I'm the
Fran.
founder. I'm the founder of Powerstories Theater. So I got to play you, Heather. It was so much fun.
So talk about doppelganger. Well,
Yeah.
Thank you all, and artistic director Deb Kelly, who was in touch with us and answered our questions before we got on. Just thank you all for what you did for passing this on, and the most important lesson at this point, when we are in a knife's edge in this country about whether we go forward or go backward, not just on abortion and reproductive freedom, but on whether women can be equal members of the society, or whether, I just heard a story on the news today about in South Korea, people are being tracked and taunted and beaten up if they're called a feminist in South Korea. And just thinking about, are we on a downward path that could be our future? Or is our future one of great promise and hope, and the people who were both acting and in the audience, that you rise up and that we organize? And what I call for is that we organize with love at the center, and through that, with our artistic support, things like this play that will change the world. And I'm glad to see my sisters from Jane, who we didn't really know each other then because we were in Jane at different times. I was early Jane and they were later Jane. They were the real Jane. So thank you all. Back to Diane.
Well, hello, I'm Diane Stevens, and I'm glad to be here and be a part of this. I joined Jane, it was kind of by accident, really. I had had an abortion, not through Jane, but it I felt that I had something to offer to women that were pregnant. I could do abortion counseling, and suddenly I found myself in a group that helped women get illegal abortions and then went on to be actually doing illegal abortions. It really changed my whole life. Like Eileen said, having a feeling of competence, being able to help other women, but also being able to work with women towards a common goal. And that really influenced my whole life. I went on to be a healthcare worker, and the tenets that I learned then about how to treat people, and as a healthcare professional, never to stand above people, but to be with them in their struggles. I've done that my whole life. And, now these times are really hard and scary. So, like Heather, I'm really glad that you guys are out there doing this. I'm happy to answer any questions anybody has about anything, really. So, thank you.
I think we'll have lots of questions.
Hi, I'm Paula, the playwright. It's so good to see the Powerstories people that we've been emailing with for so long. Right here, it's yeah, Claire Ann, Deb, Fran, Gigi, and I wanted to say too that you're so brave to put this on. That it did take guts. We actually had two early productions of Jane Picketed by the anti-abortion people, and it added a lot of an undercurrent of fear through the whole performance. So you have a lot of guts, especially in a red state. And this is the second time that the play, it's a sad milestone. It's the second time the play has been performed in a state where abortion is basically outlawed. So again, that obviously adds another layer of heaviness to it. And I wanted to also mention that Diane, I've never met you, but it's so good to connect. Diane was one of the abortion 7 that was arrested. So she really went, she really sacrificed a lot. And just to make a long story short, I found out about Jane in the early 90s when I was in my early 20s, and I just written a book about young women and feminism, and I was interested in how the generations of feminists relate to each other. I was on a panel about intergenerational feminism with the Jewish United Fund, and then someone who was from the older generation mentioned Jane, and I was fascinated, especially being from Chicago and being raised in the south suburbs, just about 20 minutes from Hyde Park. So then I had a background in journalism and used that to help find some Jane people, and that's and the play has been most active lately since the Trump administration, and then it had another big wave after Dobbs a few years ago.
Well, Paula, it was an honor to do the show. We've been trying to do the show for a while. First, Gigi was going to do it with another group, and it kind of fell through the cracks. And when it fell through the cracks with that other theater company, I thought, oh, okay, we're going to grab it. So we grabbed it and ran with it, and we had all kinds of plans in October of this year on doing it on both sides of the bay in several nights. But Florida got hit by 3 hurricanes, like within 3 weeks, and many of the staff members were affected. And of course, many of the community members were affected. So we had no choice but to take it off the book for October. So we were just really honored to do the play. I think all the actors and all the cast and crew, everybody involved with it was just buzzing with gratitude and excitement for doing it.
Thank you.
Well, let's open it up for questions. If folks have questions, and raise your hands. Don't be shy.
That's right.
I think Gigi has a question. Okay.
And then
Actually,
Janice.
I have a question for you. Hi, Paula. Finally,
Hi.
all the back and forth. Did you, I noticed, reading everything that you've written about the play, that your research was in the archives at Northwestern. And two questions. We had somebody who was in the journalism school in the cast at Northwestern. Were you also in that journalism school at Northwestern?
No, my dad
Oh,
wouldn't.
okay.
He wouldn't let me apply to Northwestern. It was too expensive. Yeah, I went to the U of I.
Okay.
Champaign Urbana. Yes.
Yeah, I was just curious if like we had that even more synergy, with our cast member who had
Yeah.
school of journalism. Anyway.
Yeah, definitely. Yes. Yeah, it's a great school of journalism.
Yeah.
I think Janice had a question. Yeah.
Well, my question, first of all, I bow to you women. Thank you so much for your work and your inspiration. When, even before Roe v. Wade was obliterated, when they started messing with it, I said, I was in my kitchen, and I said out loud, I have a background years ago in midwifery. And I said, oh, we have to learn, the women will need to do it ourselves. We need to learn to do it. I grew up in Chicago. Somehow I missed until we started talking about it here that Jane had existed. I mean, I hung out in Hyde Park. I was from the south side of Chicago. Anyway, my question is, am I completely and utterly naive? In your play, Paula, you say at the end through Janice Cornetti, what did she play?
Judith.
Through
Yeah,
Judith.
great lines.
That it's a different story now. These people will hurt your children, the whole. Anyway, in Jane, it's postulated that it's a whole new world in terms of, yeah, they knew about it, they were against it, but not actively like out for us or something. So do you think it would be possible to have a Jane-like movement, service, collective today?
I think things are already going on. There are pill networks going on. I mean, the technology is so different than it was back then, but there's stuff going on. So yes, it's possible.
Yeah.
And what do you think?
Oh, I definitely think so. I know in Chicago, there's groups of people that are buying the pill, stockpiling or providing it to, groups. Besides the groups that are helping to get money together and provide services so people can come to Illinois, because luckily we have been able to continue to provide abortions. So there's that level. And then, but I do think there's little pockets and probably in a lot of places.
Even before Jane, there were midwives who were taking care of women's problems.
Yeah.
In the civil rights movement, I lived in one of the towns in Mississippi, and the person I lived with was a midwife, and this is part of what she did. And so it's just that it isn't talked about. It's not surprising you didn't know about it. Partly it was illegal. We didn't discuss it. Laura's book was the first real time I discussed it. There also was a sociological study by Pauline Bart, an amazing sociologist who died last year, I think. So not surprising you didn't know about it, but also just think about things that have changed in addition to the technology. Women weren't doctors then. Women weren't given medical backgrounds, and so, or almost none. And just the world has changed. And so there are thousands. In fact, I think that once they started blind admissions to medical school, the majority of people going into medical school, I think, are now women. And so, but not knowing exactly what's going on and where. There certainly are some of these national abortion funds, as you've discussed it, are ways to support people in an above ground and those who are making arrangements for those who need to be below ground. And thanks, Janice, for your involvement.
Janet?
Go ahead, Janet.
I'm trying to am I unmuted?
Yes, you are.
Yeah.
Okay,
You're good.
perfect. First of all, I read for Ruth last night, and it was a wonderful experience. But I have to tell you that I'm a kind of like a contemporary. I'll be 75 this year. So back in the time, I was so Catholic that I couldn't even talk about birth control. And so what I want to know, Heather, is how you found the balls to just put this out there in that era. It's like, what the fuck? It's like amazing.
First, I want to say a word about Ruth. Jody was the driver. She was the organizer. But Ruth was the heart and soul. She had an incredible heart and soul. So thank you for playing Ruth. Lots of stories about her. On abortion, at that point, I think you probably know this, and I'm 79. So we grew up at a time when not only did people not talk about abortion, I barely talked about sex with anyone except my most intimate partners in the most greatest privacy. And we thought it was sex to talk about, to get the book Peyton Place, which is a novel at that point, and then underline the dirty parts, the sexy parts. It was such a, let alone songs that were about it. You know, if the song said, ooh, wow, you say, oh, well, maybe that's sex. It was a different world.
It was.
And I didn't think I was getting into anything. I literally thought I was doing a favor for a friend who was in need. And partly because it wasn't legal, so we didn't discuss it, and I didn't know what the statute of limitations was. But even when I talk to people about what I've done with my life, and I've been in lots of organizations, immigration reform, financial reform, Social Security, marriage equality, many, many issues, I wouldn't mention Jane. Not because I was thinking I'm not going to mention it, but because it didn't rise up to the level of my thinking about it as the same kind of thing. It was a service, and I thought the others are the activity in the world. So it was more like this was a good deed. And you can tell now the impact that it's had on so many people's lives. I think you know this, but I didn't know that abortion was common. After Roe, 1 in 3 women would have an abortion. Whoa. 1 in 3. That means if you go through this, you see, so I never had one. That's 1, 2, 3. One of us, 1, 2, 3. Then it became 1 in 4, both as birth control became more common. As people learned more about it, we learned about how we even operated sexually and reproductive systems. And then also, I think the AIDS epidemic made people more careful. And now all the restrictions. So it then became 1 in 4, 1 in 5. I don't know what it is now. But so the question is, how did we get into it? It was like, you take one step, then another, and suddenly there's a service. There's these wonderful women who came in, Eileen and so many others, and Diane, and suddenly there are 11,000 women who were able to come through.
I think too, for me, I was brought up Catholic and I never even thought about abortion. I barely thought about sex until I went to college and had sex. But And then it still didn't really, like you really didn't talk about it with anybody. But when a woman in my dorm had an illegal abortion and she needed help and I ended up helping her out, I was involved with political stuff. But I went to like a meeting the next day and I kept asking people, because to me it seemed very clear then that it was a political issue and not just a personal issue. But no, everybody looked at me like I was like, what's the big deal? I mean, so it really was sort of, but at the same time, things were opening up so fast, 68, 69, 70. It was like an explosion of every possibility all of a sudden was out there. And if you happen to be 18, 19 years old, you're like, whoa, it was easy to all of a sudden like put aside a lot of the things I was brought up on. I never thought about them again, until later you have to kind of go, how did I get from here to here? How did that happen? But it was a really exciting and explosive time. And if you happen to be right, and I had just moved to Chicago, stuff was happening, but anywhere in the whole country. I mean, it was a monumental shift in culture. Mm-hmm. And I was lucky enough to be there when it happened because it did make a huge difference. And it was fun. I will say it was fun too, which is kind of weird, but it was fun.
Say more about that really quick. I know we've got a question waiting, but say a little more about that.
Well, it was fun because one, you were working with other people and you were doing something so concrete. Everything else sort of seemed very theoretical and a position paper on this and that, and you'd feel so frustrated. I mean, you'd work on it and you'd demonstrate and write letters, but it was so concrete because you were actually helping people. And you worked with a group of people that were some people were just like you, and there were a lot of people not. I mean, I was a 21 years old hippie girl, and there were like married women with kids, housewives. I mean, I really felt in the beginning I had nothing in common with them, but it turns out you did, especially when you were working together. And it was illegal, which was scary, but it was kind of fun. So just that probably kept everything going on one level. I don't know.
Wow. Yeah, I totally agree. It was like our own special world. And the whole world was changing. We felt the whole world was changing. It was the 60s, rock and roll and everything. And there we were. We felt like we were on the front lines and we were doing something important. Every day I had a reason to be awake and alert and doing things and talking to people and having women and sometimes their partners come to my house, and just, it's hard to explain. It was like a whole world. It was like, but we felt like it was like a microcosm because I felt that the whole world was changing. Right.
And because of the people we worked with, that came through, it opened up my eyes to all different kinds of ways of being. I mean, the city of Chicago became so much more richer, and you found out about the West Side and the South Side, and you met people from so many different walks of life that I just never had thought about. And that was so remarkable and certainly influenced how I felt about things. And it shifted. It was like, kind of like every person that came through had a story, and not everybody, but most people wanted to tell you. And so that enriched our lives incredibly because you learned another layer of what it was like to be a woman in different kinds of situations.
Andy, you have your hand up?
Yes, first of all, very quick kudos. I was fortunate to be in the audience yesterday and blown away, Paula, by the play, Fran and Claire Ann, hope I'm saying that right, to how well acted and what a profound story of the original Janes. And I had two questions. First of all, to ask, was there a defining moment when the original Janes went from, well, the doctors are kind of sketchy. Oh, they're not really doctors. Well, we could be just as good as those not doctors. And and my second question is how active the clergy actually was in the referral, the Protestant and the Jewish clergy in referring to Jane.
Well, I'm trying to I mean, I was there when it wasn't exactly one thing. Certainly finding out that Mike wasn't a doctor was huge, because I had had my abortion with Mike, and we all and we told every woman that came through, a doctor will be doing your abortion. And it was a freaky thing. And so to go from there, you know, and some people got real freaked out and left the group, and other people said, we're going to keep going. And then I think it was, it was just sort of from that point on, it became clear that maybe we could actually do it. And part of it was the money thing, having to always fight about the money. How much money do we have to get? How much money? So I think that also was added into it. So it wasn't one specific thing, although that one meeting, I remember everybody being kind of in shock. I was in shock. Like, wait, whoa. So I don't know. I don't know. I remember, Diane, you were at that meeting, and
yeah, we learned little by little, though, because Jody was so had a real friendship with Mike, and so she was already learning the parts of it, and the way we would teach each other. I mean, once she knew how to do the abortions, we would just teach each other little by little. Like, first you were the person holding the hand, and then you would add on to that, you'd give them that first injection, and then you'd put in the speculum. And so it was very fluid the way we learned. And I think our learning, the way we learned, was really was slower and more thoughtful than healthcare providers learn how to do procedures when they're in training, because they're like the see one, do one, teach one thing. And we were like, it was very slow. And we were so careful, and we were so respectful of the women. I don't know if that was the question anybody asked, but I kind of went off on that.
One of the reasons that I think it was safer than even the abortions provided in hospitals or clinics, partly it was the only thing that was being done. So you become expert in one thing. You're also not rushing off because there's both a demand you can't meet, but you're not doing, now it's an abortion and now I'm breaking I'm fixing a broken ankle. Now I've got to deal a cancer patient or whatever. And also it wasn't about the money ever. So I think there are reasons why it was, and also because it was illegal. One of the things to note about immigration, a reason why I think that probably immigrants are the most law-abiding people in the country is when you're, I think there's even a Bob Dylan song that says something like, when you're illegal, you have to live within the law. So.
Thank you. And that's just amazing. And the women who benefited from what you did probably changed their life for generations. And that's phenomenal. And the second part was just quickly how a Protestant minister was well portrayed yesterday as being very active in your process. And there was reference also to Jewish clergy who participated. And was that real factual? If that's not that something could be not factual, right?
No, they were very upfront. I mean, there was ads in the paper, there were articles about them. And if you went to them, they would explain exactly the stuff. And they were at that point, when they could, they would refer to a legal place. But when people didn't have money, then they would tell them about Jane. So they were very instrumental, one, in treating people very well about it, and two, being very honest with what they could do and how the people that didn't have money, then that was huge that they referred it to Jane. And then after the bust, they were very helpful in getting all those people that still needed abortions. They provided money to get them to New York, to Pennsylvania, and help get those abortions done. Because, you know, there was this gap where all of a sudden we weren't doing abortions and there were people that were planning on getting abortions. So yeah, that was true. That was really true and a good portrayal. Yes.
Yeah.
Janice?
Oh, sure.
I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to say that I met through different people I knew in Hyde Park, E. Spencer Parsons, and he was already elderly when I talked to him in the early 90s.
Yeah.
So, yeah, speaking of Northwestern, he donated, he donated all of his papers, so there's a whole archive of the clergy consultation service at Northwestern. And then I didn't realize till after he died that Rabbi Tickton of the Hillel there got arrested for helping women. I don't think it was Jane. And he unfortunately he passed away in the last several years, but I wished, yeah, I only found out about him recently.
Oh.
So yeah, so it was Protestant clergy and rabbis basically who were running this. Or does Heather remember E. Spencer Parsons?
We were not close,
Yes.
but we knew each other.
Okay.
And there wasn't a deep connection at that point. But also on the religious aspect in general, to Andy's question, you know, in Judaism, there's even a section of the Torah that says that it may be a requirement to provide an abortion if the woman needs it. There's I don't remember the exact quote, but it's something like the rabbis are debating and say that if a woman who's pregnant is harmed and is beaten up or is injured, and to save her life, the fetus needs to be disposed of, that's the requirement because the fetus is part of the woman until birth.
Yeah.
And so different religions have different beliefs. I do a fair amount actually within the Jewish community. I'm speaking actually, there's a Repro Shabbat for the National Council of Jewish Women in February, nationally. It's being done all around the country. And I'm the speaker at one of them. So there's some religions where this is elevated as part of our act in believing in saving a life, the life of the mother.
Janice?
Well, it's actually for me. So first of all, Paula, thank you for writing this work and the work that you did to bring these amazing stories to light. And I was so happy to be there last night and sharing that. One of the most compelling portrayals last night, even though my young bride was in it, but I'll say one of the most compelling portrayals last night was the portrayal of Jody, I thought. And someone described her as a driving force within this movement. There's a particular part in the play where Jody is coming to the realization of how many actual abortions she's done and everything else. And it felt like she started off thinking about this as an accomplishment and kind of walked away thinking about it in another sense at that point. And I wondered if that was ever an experience that you had where at times you had mixed feelings about actually performing the abortions and so on at that time, despite serving people, whether it impacted you personally in the way it seemed to impact Jody in that scene in the play. And I don't know if you intended that in that scene or not, Paula, but it kind of struck me at that moment.
Yeah, basically, she was still devoted to the cause, but it really had a toll on her mental health that I didn't realize until I saw the documentary, the HBO, that she had gone into a psychiatric ward, being so worn down. So it took such a huge toll on her. She was like yeah, it just shows that we're all human. And yeah, and what kind of pressure she was under. It was unbelievable.
Yeah, it was amazing, and I thought that she did an amazing job portraying Jody last night. And also felt like that turning point that Andy brought up, from going to being dependent on others to determining that you could provide these abortions yourself and do that, was done really powerfully in this, and that how that kind of gradually took over in the movement and people were able to support each other in doing that work. I thought it was phenomenal. And so well done by the Janes, well done Paula, and also Powerstories.
I have a question for you, for all of you.
Yeah.
Is everyone in Florida? Is that right?
Oh, yeah.
My friend is joining us from New Mexico.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I'm in Chicago, and Eileen's in Chicago area.
Yeah.
I'm in North Carolina.
North Carolina.
I meant of the, yeah.
Yes.
My question to all of you is, are you also involved in the organizing? Were you involved in the organizing around the ballot measure? Because partly to show abortion went from being not discussed, and then it was a political hot potato, like, you're going to deal with abortion, my God, you're going to get killed yourself, to now, I don't know what the figures are, it's probably, I don't know, 60% of the population or more are fully in favor with it around the country, by I think every religion, race, geography except evangelicals. And of the 7 ballot measures, there were 7 ballot measures that we won in red states, blue states, purple states. There were only 3 that were lost. In Florida, we won a majority. We got 57%. We just didn't get 60% as the threshold. And even in Nebraska, a very red state, we defeated the bad amendment. We just didn't win the pro amendment. And the only state we lost was South Dakota. So what I wondered is, were any of you involved in that fight? And if so, what now is the status of the struggle in Florida, and what are you thinking comes next?
Well, I haven't gotten that far, Heather, because I'm still in kind of a little bit of inertia. But yes, I worked on it, and greeted people at the ballots and everything, and tried to explain this amendment, because I don't know if you read the amendment that they put on our Florida ballot, but if I didn't know anything about what was going on, I would have gone, what? They worded it. They literally said, now, this is going to cause more abortions. I mean, it was just lies on the ballot. So I haven't gotten to the next step of, okay, but I hope others of you have. I'd love to.
Thank you for getting you over 50% against all the odds, against all that is Florida in its political establishment. Thank you, Janice.
So the very first group that I was involved with a year ago, trying to mount this, there were 4 of us who were trying to get it produced, and 2 out of the 4 of us were extremely active. Elizabeth Corrin, I don't know if y'all locally saw, but Elizabeth Corrin had these sashes made up, the suffragette looking sashes that said, vote yes on 4, and was handing them out all over the place to people, and moving them about on mannequins in various spots and things like that. She was incredibly active. She didn't attend a single meeting in Tampa without standing up and saying, yeah, this is, what we need to have done. And then, do you guys know Shelley is her last name Robeck or Rebeck or whatever? She's on the local.
Oh, Shelley Reback. Actually, I knew her from Tampa
right.
I worked on the Hillary campaign down there.
Right. She actually mentioned, so Shelley was on that initial team of women. And Shelley said, well, if we ever get this up, I'm going to get in touch with Heather and have her come, because she said that she didn't know you. And of course, Shelley, I mean, once a week on a radio program, she was advocating for the cause. But so we initially, when we started it, we were really, and of course, I'm not saying that the Powerstories, group wasn't also active in this way too. But when we first grabbed onto it, it was by a group of women who are very active in trying to get that vote. But I find it a positive that Florida was 57%, almost 58%. I mean, it just so happens that we have that 60% threshold, obviously, which other states didn't have, right? So I take it as a positive that we're almost there. And so if we just can figure out a way to get it back on again, or figure out to get some, different folk running our government, I think we might be able to. Yeah, I know you're laughing. I see all of you all laughing at that.
I'm with you completely. My sister lives in Florida. We talk about it all the time.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Anyway, so that's I think the next time it comes around, we'll get it. That's what I think.
Yes.
Obviously, if ever any of us, I'm speaking for others, but I think this is what they would feel too. But if any of us and Jane could help you in any way at all, I mean, some are health professionals now or were. I've been an organizer my whole life in different activities. And if we could ever help, we stand shoulder to shoulder with you and appreciate all you're doing in very hard circumstances.
Well, we're going to need that, because it seems like after the election, everything went quiet. Just people weren't talking about anything anymore, and so we do need to rally. We do need to do more, get it on the ballot again. I think it can pass again if we saw how close it was the last time. I think we could get it passed again. There's an awful lot of people in Florida that hate the fact that it's a red state. We don't want it to be a red state. That's not the way we believe, so a lot of people are leaving the state of Florida because it's a red state. They just don't want to be a part of it anymore. And then more people are coming in that are, make it a more red state. So it's discouraging.
James, I have a question, and it's basically, when you heard that they were talking about Roe versus Wade being overturned, did you think this could actually happen? What was your reaction when it was officially overturned, after you going through all of this in your time?
Well, I knew it was happening. I was in Maine, and so I was following Susan Collins, and she was dithering a little bit, and then she said she would support Kavanaugh. So I saw it going down right at that point. And then I moved to North Carolina, and I do some work escorting at clinics. So I see the anti-abortion folks up close and personal as they're harassing people trying to access health care. Yeah, it's horrible. It's horrible. And just the atmosphere is so much worse than when we were doing Jane. The misogyny is worse. These are rough times. And, we say there's a lot of work to be done, and it's true. And I think many of us feel really disheartened after the election. It's kind of hard to get our feet back under us.
After I, with my experience with this play, and then after last night, I thought a lot, you guys, you local folk. I thought a lot about energizing, the 18, 19, 20, 21-year-olds that you all were. You guys got this going, right? And I want to know how to do that. I There's somebody there with the background going on. But I want to know how to get those young women who aren't as, let's face it. I'm 67. I'm a little scared, and part of me thinks you guys weren't scared. You just did what you thought needed to be done, Sure, it was legal, but you just went ahead and did it, and so that's what I wonder about. How do we get those young people like you guys were active?
I'd say two different things and then turn over to this. One is I've been scared or feeling insecure about almost anything I've ever done. I was nervous about this Zoom. Is it going to be right? Will we know enough? Are we smart enough? Are we, everything in the society tells you you're not good enough. You're not pretty enough. You're not thin enough. You're not enough. And part of what our mission is to let people know we are more than enough. We are, as I think Gloria Steinem said, the leaders we've been waiting for. We can make that leadership. It's not being scared. It's that in spite of it and realizing we may not be able to do it alone, but we can do it together. A lot's been made of the sole hero, but in fact, we're heroes when we work together. And so that's part of the message I think we need to convey, because many people do feel insecure, but we can still do it. And the second thing is, there are women, young women, and young men of goodwill. And I see there's Theron is on the call now, and I don't know if there were other men from last night, but men of goodwill joining in. I had a husband of goodwill. I have 2 sons of grandchildren, and there is a new generation. And even in this last election, we should remember it was very close. It was a 1.5% difference between the 2 elections. We were 48.3%. Trump got 49.9%, I think, or 8%. And what really happened is that our people, 19 million people, stayed home who had voted for Biden and didn't vote for Kamala. That the whole system wasn't working and they didn't feel invested enough. It's not that people turned over and more voted for Trump than he had before. He didn't have a bigger vote than he had before. He didn't have a bigger percentage of the actual available electorate, at about 31% of the electorate. But Kamala had a 4% decline. I spent almost a year in first the Biden and then the Harris campaign, so that I thought about this a lot. We have an enormous base to build on, but we have people who have given up hope that change is possible, that we can actually improve lives. And part of what you do by this play, by sharing this message, is give people confidence. We can change this world when we act together. And we will change this world when we act together. Trump will overplay his hand and he'll harm people in their lives, and we need to call it out and pull people together and show how we can move on abortion, but on so many other issues, on healthcare, on education, on democracy itself. Anyway, so thank you all for what you've done. You helped build that.
Well, Heather, we really appreciate those words of inspiration.
Yeah.
And leaving it on an up note. I know as one who is working daily on Powerstories, this vision is that we can change the world by using the transformative theater that we do to tell positive, good, rich stories. So many times people leave our theater and they say, I didn't know that about her. I didn't know that story before. So we're doing what we can to build that network and body of people to tell really rich stories and transform and change people's lives. We would have loved to have done this play more nights. I've heard several people say, let's do it again. So we're we're doing our part here through theater and through just other things. So we just before we go, Diane, I wanted to ask you about, weren't you the one that was one of the original ones that was arrested?
Yes, I was arrested.
Okay, tell us what that was about. And then,
Oh, well, what was that about? Well, the story was that there was a woman who was set to have an abortion, and one of her family members was against it. And she went to the police and asked them to intervene. And if you watch the movie, the cop says, well, this wasn't really of interest to us, but we were the homicide cops, but we got pulled into this. So the police came to the place where we were doing abortions and came in and arrested us. And they also went to the other place, the front, and arrested people there also, and arrested the driver who showed up at one of the places. So so we were taken to the local police station, and I had been a little mouthy, so I was handcuffed to a table for a long time. But anyway, eventually we were moved to the women's lockup, and we were in the women's lockup and talking to other women that had just been arrested. And then we were put in cells. And I was very lucky that I was in a cell with Martha, who is really a great person. So the two of us were cellmates and remained good friends. And one person, Judith, well, her husband was a lawyer, and so of course, he got involved right away and developed a strategy to get her out in night court, where there was a nice judge that would let her out on recognizance, because she was married to a lawyer, and she was breastfeeding. She was a breastfeeding mother, and so that was a good reason to get her out of jail. So she got out in night court, and then the rest of us spent the night there and were released the next morning for bail. So I always say when I've gone to conferences and stuff, I've met other people that do illegal things, and I'm a little humbled at the things other people are doing. I was only in jail for one night. Well, I'm not saying it was a great night or anything, but it was one night. And then we had, I didn't work with the group for a while because we were all really scared that we were being followed or phones tapped or whatever. But eventually, the legal stuff went on, and we had court appearances. I got a cute dress to wear for my court appearances. Of course. And, and my thinking, well, I was very young. I was just in my early 20s, and I was very naive. So my thinking in this little group I was in, the 7 women, that if anybody had to go to jail, it wouldn't be so bad if I went to jail, because I didn't have children. I didn't have a close family. Nobody was depending on me. And there was an organization, the Chicago Women's Liberation Group, and I knew they had a women's prison project. So I was thinking, well, then those women would come down and bring me books or whatever,
Oh my God.
I know, crazy, huh? But like I said, I was young and naive,
Well, you were always thinking,
looking on the bright side of things, right? Get those books. So anyway, eventually, when Roe v. Wade happened, then the case was dismissed and my record was expunged. So I was able to go on and have, work in healthcare. So it all worked out okay.
Claire Ann, do you want to close it out?
I'd love to. Thank you, Diane. I will share that whenever I leave the house for a protest, my husband asks me not to get arrested. And I've had a couple close calls. So just thank you, and it's probably smart not to. Anyway,
So I had one thing I was going to mention, which maybe this is a little off the wall, but I'm going to be in your area next week. I'm flying into Lakeland Airport, and then I'm going to visit a friend of mine in Gainesville, and then I'm going to fly out of Lakeland. And I'd be, if anybody wants to just have a cup of coffee or whatever, it'd be a lot of fun.
Yes, please.
Okay. So specifically, I'll send, I've got Deb's phone number. I'll just send her some details. And if anybody wants to get together and have a cup of coffee, that'd be really fun.
That'd be great. That'd be great. That'd be great.
Yeah.
Hey,
And Diane-
TR, we haven't heard from you. You want to say anything? I'm calling you out.
Yeah, I wanted to specifically listen, and I am excited by what I hear here from the sisterhood component of what you all did and the impact of the work. I'm excited for, as Heather puts it, how to get through the fear and get to doing the work that needs to get done. I think it's important too, as earlier it was discussed about getting the young folks to understand, to like activate them, to be caring. That Heather, we've got to turn them, sort of, I don't know, activate them so that they understand what's at stake from how things were in the past and how things are in an odd trajectory. I am in awe of the strength of the women in this room. I want more men to get on board and get activated as well, because it is a collective we. It is a relationship, and there is no reason why these types of choices should not remain with each individual. There is, I'm constantly dumbfounded by where things have gone. And I think this kind of art, this kind of storytelling, the way that the sisterhood developed and the relationships, more of us in this digital technology age have to find those relationships so that we understand that all of our fates are tied to one another. And the better outcomes happen when we work together. So this divisiveness and it's not my problem and too bad for them, that's what's holding us back. We've got to get everybody to understand that we all want to pull in the same direction because it lifts us all up. So I just applaud that you guys are incredible. And I am so honored that I was able to listen and witness these stories and the truths that you have put out there. And hopefully, people will continue to be activated so that we can make the change that's needed and necessary for everybody to have that ability across the United States. It's claiming to be a free nation to be able to have these choices.
Thanks,
Yes,
TR.
absolutely.
Yes.
And Paula, I'll see you in like 2 weeks, right?
Yes. I put the link in the chat if anyone knows people in Chicago who want to see another benefit reading. It's for the Chicago Abortion Fund.
Heather, what do you have coming up next? What are you up to these days?
Even while we're on this call, I have several speeches that I have to give. I'm speaking to the National Women's Democratic Club on what was the meaning of the election. Preparing for that. I run a national call every week, twice a week, called Progressive Mobilization. It's for people who are leaders of organizations. We're now arranging for the people who are running for the DNC chair to be on, and others, so that it just advises people. There's this People's March that's coming up on January 19th, was originally a women's march, and now, but I'm told they have 100,000 people coming to DC for it. Maybe there are events around the country. Nancy Pelosi's having a call on January 12th. They also hope to get 100,000 people on healthcare Abortion will be part of that program, but it's basically to stop the Trump tax cuts, $2 trillion, $2 trillion in tax cuts. And to give those tax cuts, it means they'll be cutting almost every other program that we care about. That's something we can fight back on. But Iran, how do we do that? It's partly they are going to be taking away things people need. And at that point, we need to organize and fight back. So my whole life is involved in that kind of organization. I thank you for the inspiration you've given to the 100 women who were there last night, and to those of us who are here tonight. And
thank you.
Together we support each other, and we'll organize and we'll change the world.
Yes.
Okay, take it away, Claire Ann.
Well, I'm going to attempt this. I thought I had good segues. I'm just going to jump right in. Thank you for joining us. Our next step, I just want to share really quickly, is next Tuesday at Shuffle at 6:30 p.m. is our Voices of Women Speaking for Our Lives open mic. We expect that Bree from the Tampa Bay Abortion Fund will be joining us that night. Diane, if you're in town, come on over. Best tater tots in Tampa Bay. And it's a chance for women to tell their stories, connect, and continue to build the kind of community we need around us going into these next 4 years and frankly beyond. And with that, thank you, all of you, for providing inspiration from the past, from the present, and for the future. Thank you, everyone. Good night.
Thank you.
Good
Thank
night.
you. Thank you guys so much.
Good night.
Appreciate
night.
so much you
Thank
taking
you.
your time.